There is a mountain of mechanics in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and while the game does have a lengthy tutorial that goes over most of it, there are definitely some details that slip through the cracks. And so, here are 13 things that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League doesn't tell you. Suicide Squad is not the kind of game where you're meant to just freely switch from character to character and have everyone level up alongside one another. The more you use a character, the more experience that character will gain, the more they'll level up, and the greater the disparity there will be between that character and the others. To alleviate this somewhat, there are missions where certain characters will be psyched up and will gain a bonus to both damage and XP gained, which we would definitely recommend doing whenever you can to ensure that the rest of your squad doesn't fall behind too far. Having a moderately leveled team can still help since bots will take control of these characters in single player. It's actually kind of important to know what the names and types of enemies are. Certain contracts might have you killing a scavenger after first dodging their attack. Scavengers are those guys that crouch and then dart towards you. Then, there's the distinction between grunts and brutes. Obviously, the regular sized mobs are grunts, and the hulking bombers and destroyers are brutes. But the vehicles are also classified as brutes as well. This is important to know because there are several weapons that deal enhanced damage to one type, and minimal to zero damage to another, so know where you're effective and where to switch up your weaponry. Similarly, you might also get contracts or even some mission types that demand you do land critical hits. This is somewhat explained in the tutorial, but it doesn't go into all of the details. Headshots will always net you critical hits, as will attacks on glowing weak spots. But you could also use a melee attack to launch an enemy, and while launched, all attacks regardless of where they land will be critical hits. Electrified enemies will also take critical hits on every shot, but we'll get to afflictions later. At any point, you can adjust the difficulty of the game, which has an added gameplay benefit as well. Playing on harder difficulties increases the damage taken from enemies and reduces the damage they receive, but also increases both your XP and rewards. By gaining experience on the hardest difficulty available, you'll unlock new harder invasion level difficulties, which further tweak the game balance against you, but comes with a reward of more resources, exclusive banners, crafting recipes, and other forms of loot. As you progress through the story, you'll begin to unlock afflictions through Poison Ivy's support squad missions. These are basically status elements, but they're all double-edged swords, with clear advantages and disadvantages. The game does describe all these effects, but it's very easy to miss the finer details of them without going and looking them up yourself. Deep Freeze. This freezes enemies in place for 10 seconds and increases firearm damage by 200%, but greatly decreases melee damage and completely nullifies critical hit damage. Also, enemies that are frozen in the air will fall to the ground and take 1000% damage, so yeah, look to freeze enemies in the air. Venom Frenzy. Enemies are crazed and will attack any nearby target, but will also gain a significant health boost. Diablo Blaze. Enemies that are set on fire take damage over time, but cannot be shield harvested, meaning you can't use them to get a quick refill of health. Setting those spidery terminats on fire also makes them move faster. Livewire Bolt. Enemies that are electrocuted will take critical hits with every shot, but they also deal significantly more damage, making this a big risk versus reward affliction that you especially need to be careful about. The whole crafting and upgrading system in Suicide Squad is a lot, but here's what it boils down to. Once you get a legendary or notorious villain weapon recipe, you can go to Penguin and craft as many as your resources allow to equip your whole squad with that weapon if you'd like. For less resources, you can overhaul a weapon and essentially get a new version of it with entirely rerolled stats, augments, and weapon attachments. It's important to note that overhauling will not guarantee a weapon with better stats, so if you're happy with how a weapon performs, you might be better off just leaving it alone. If you'd rather not return all the way to Penguin to overhaul your weapon, you can also overhaul in the field, albeit with an added resource cost. Modifying is done at Toyman's shop, and instead of randomly rerolling everything on a weapon, it allows you to change one augment and choose another one among 3 others of the same rarity. Once you mod a weapon though, it's locked and cannot be modded anymore. In Chapter 4 and beyond, you begin to use nano enhancements on your legendary weapons to increase their overall base values by increasing everything from their accuracy, adding a scope, or even increasing magazine size. You'll know a weapon can use nano enhancements by the green fraction right here, indicating that the more you use that weapon, the more points you can earn to spend on nano enhancements. Finally, don't sleep on Toyman and Poison Ivy's support squad missions. The final reward of Poison Ivies is the ability to supercharge your afflictions and strengthen them up to 5 times. Toyman, on the other hand, can turn a weapon into an elite version of that weapon, which removes the restriction of a weapon only being able to be modded 1 time. With an elite weapon, you can keep on re-rolling modifiers until you're able to create your ideal weapon, or you run out of resources, whichever happens first. Every day you can get a care package from Aaron Cash in the Hall of Justice, which can net you a handful of materials or weapons, but you can actually increase the rarity of that care package for the next day by hunting down drones that are carrying human survivors all throughout Metropolis. Also, don't forget to check your mailbox, which can sometimes come with gifts from the developers. If sorting through each weapon in your squad is becoming a pain, remember that there's a tooltip to manage your inventory while looking through their loadout. You can mark multiple weapons or other gear to be broken down, and then remove them from your inventory to get a bit of currency for your troubles. As with many games that focus on loot drops, you'll find several tiers of rarity as you progress. Green items are uncommon, and usually only have 1 added effect. Blue items are rare, and mostly have 1 to 2 augmented effects. Purple items are epic, and will have anywhere from 1 to 3 augmented effects. Legendary items are yellow, and will always have at least 2 to 3 augmented effects, plus a specific legendary effect. Notorious items are pink, and are supervillain themed, with at least 2 to 3 augmented effects, plus a notorious effect that's often much better than legendary effects. Infamous items are red, are themed after notable heroes and villains, and contain not only 2 to 3 augmented effects, but set bonuses that stack with more pieces of a set you find and equip. Pay close attention when equipping or crafting new shiny legendary items or even more rare variants. Some can have very important trade-offs, like dealing increased damage to one type of enemy, but virtually none to other types. The last thing you want to do is roll into battle with a useless weapon, so know when to swap or when to try and craft something else when visiting Penguin. One other thing to note is that there are hidden villain synergy bonuses that can occur when you equip weapons of 2 synergizing villains. Like, for example, having Black Mask's Bulletstorm heavy weapon and the punch-through shotgun from Bane's Infamy set gave me the Terror Behind the Mask perk, which builds up stacks of a buff for every non-vehicular enemy you kill, and when you reach 5 stacks, the next enemy that you inflict Craze upon deals 500% more damage while crazed, and you deal 500% more damage as well as long as that enemy is still alive. So experiment by mixing and matching your villain-themed weapons to see what comes up. If you're wondering why you'd want to bother completing the Combat Flair challenges in the middle right portion of the screen, the answer is that if you manage to complete all of them, you will instantly restore all of your health and shield, and also shoot up your combo level, granting you access to some of your more powerful buffs and talents. You're probably well aware of the Riddler trophies and puzzles littered all across Metropolis, but there's another type of collectible that is much harder to find as they're not labeled on the map. These are audio logs that detail the events that transpired on the day of Brainiac's invasion. There's not much tangible reward for finding these, but they're interesting to hear the backstory of how things got so bad so fast in Metropolis. For the real min-maxers out there, or those who just want to be able to visually see the effects of all of their gear, you can press in the right stick on the loadout screen to view a summary of all your stats. Not only that, but if you go to your talent submenu, you can do the same thing to get a top-level look at everything that you're currently getting a bonus to, based on your talent choices. This is very helpful when it comes to figuring out the kind of playstyle you should employ in order to deal the most damage you can. And there's your collection of tips that we felt could use a bit of extra explaining in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. For more Suicide Squad, check out our video on which member of Task Force X you should choose, and for everything else, keep it here on IGN.